we are going to discuss chapter 5. So one of the things that should be clear to you if you have worked through the chapter is that inflation is not, see, when if you don't have a understanding of it, you think that there is one number which is the inflation number, so it's 7.8 or 7.3. Maybe the statistics department doesn't have the right data, so they might make a mistake. But there is exactly one number which is the correct number for inflation, and our goal is to try to measure it. Maybe we can't measure it accurately. We don't have all the data, but there is a number. But what I wanted to say is there is no number. There is no such thing as a if you say what is the exact correct true value of inflation, there's no answer to that. There is no correct number for inflation. There can be a wide range of inflation numbers. It can vary from family to family. And even the inflation varies if you go from the bundle you're consuming this year to the last year. So the commodity bundle that you're pricing changes over time. So there's just no way to. So you make a lot of different arbitrary choices. You standardize the bundle in some way, but every choice is arbitrary. You use different commodity weights. You make the decision on what will be the base commodity, and keeping the base commodity in the past, which is the Laspeyres method, is easier computationally, although everyone knows that the Pasch method should be more accurate because it uses the current commodity weight, so this should be better. But nobody uses that because the data demands of that method are too high. You need to keep up the, you need to get much more information to calculate the Pasch index. So basically, the bigger picture is that a lot of numbers that we think are accurate are just vague, imprecise, and actually qualitative. See, we think of inflation as a quantitative phenomena, but actually it's a qualitative phenomena. It's the uh, it's the discomfort that you suffer due to having higher prices, and this varies from person to person and depends on things like how rigid we are in terms of our tastes. So if something goes up in price, maybe we can substitute it by something cheaper if we are flexible. Maybe we can't if we do not. So these issues are never brought up in a nominal statistics course because you're not supposed to go beyond the numbers. But this is the key difference of a real statistics course, that numbers are never enough to describe reality. So you have to look through the numbers, beyond the numbers, to get to the what is the reality which is being measured by the numbers. Is this reality being accurately measured? Maybe there are other numbers which describe the situation better. Maybe there's a collection of numbers, and that's so inflation varies for the poor and for the rich, and it has different effects on different classes of people. So all of these things. So basically, the goal is to show that statistics is not what it seems to be. All right. So with this much as background and introduction, I would like to start with Group A and to handle the questions that are in the section A. So who's going to do Group A questions?
Saira, would you go for that or
Saira?
I'll explain? Please share my screen. She's not there. Please share. Let me share my screen.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Okay, I have prepared the answer, but I didn't prepare the presentation. So I'm supposed to
I'll
present
present
those.
that. Don't you worry. I'll present my questions.
I have to present those questions. Okay. I'm sharing my screen.
I have already shared my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
I can see a screen. Yes, I got
Yeah.
it.
Okay. So these are the questions. So unfortunately, as I just told you, only Saira Akram cannot give the questions, solutions to these questions. So I have some crisp answers to these questions. The first question is about the average ranks. So just try to understand the ranks for me are like the unlike terms in the mathematics. We know that the like terms are having the same variable. For example, like 3x and 4y, you cannot find the average of like 3x and 4y, just like that. So you cannot find the average of ranks, and they gives you nothing. So the choices or the ranks are qualitative information, and the average ranks conceal the variation within the choices. So you cannot find, you cannot present the average of the ranks. So that's the crisp answer to this question. Now we have the second question. It was about three scenarios, and in the three scenarios, there is a headline of 10 percentage points inflation. So what does it mean? So what kind of information is concealed by this headline? The same thing as explained before. So the headline concealed which fraction of, particularly I'm explaining, the fraction of the population hit hard by the rising prices. As far as the Pakistan is concerned, say for example, the masses has nothing to do with the prices of the luxurious items. So the people are concerned with the prices of survival goods only. So it depends which type of, or which the inflation you're talking about. So the headline concealed with which fraction of the population hit hard by the rising prices. There are three different scenarios. So one number cannot represent any variation. Now we have question number 3, and it was about in the Fisherian approach, the inflation number is a sufficient statistics. It means that it captures all the information. So we have to show, okay, how we can justify that, or do not justify that inflation data. As explained before, the prices of distinct commodities changes differently. These do not follow the common pattern. Changes in prices are subject to demand and supply mechanism. However, it can be assumed that prices of the clusters of same category may change with the similar patterns. And we have luckily 3 or 4 types of the inflation numbers, such as like CPI or SPI or WPI, and the core inflation, and they reflect different prices changes for the different commodities. So it is we can expect an average. We cannot say that any average inflation reflects the any information about changes in the prices. That was answer to question number 3. Now the answer to question number 4. We have 3 types of. Question number 4 explains the 3 types of inflations. One is the consumer price index, the producer price index, and the core inflation. So we have to explain it. What group of the people are concerned with this CPI or the core inflation or the producer price index. So it is explained in the material covered, and I just you explained it again. The inflations cannot be generalized. So these inflations basically based on specific sets of items and can reflect the average change of prices over that specific group of items only. I'm just trying to give you an example. At PIDE, we had demand-driven research, and we suggest a raise in salaries on the basis of distinct level of sensitive price indicator. Luckily, at Pakistan, there are 5 types of SPI for distinct quintiles of the income. So we suggest the raise in the salaries on the basis of distinct types of SPI. So these were the crisp solution to the questions.
See, what are the 3 different groups of peoples? The CPI would be relevant to the consumers. The producer price index would be relevant to the manufacturers.
Yeah.
Core inflation would be useful for the economists, and so on. So that's one thing. The first question you skipped over quickly, that was about Amazon. So once I asked this question in the following format, so let me put it to the audience. Suppose you have one book which has 100 rankings, with everyone gives it a 3 rank. And the other book also has an average rank of 3, but there are 50 people who have ranked it 1 and 50 people who have ranked it 5. So which of these two is the more interesting book?
Yeah. Basically, we can say like the book with higher ranks might be better choices, keeping all the things same. That is the readers and their interest areas.
No. The book which has all ones and all fives is definitely the more interesting book. It is very controversial. Some people hate it, some people love it. Nobody is neutral towards it. The one with the average ranking of 3, everybody feels that it's sort of blah. So that's not very interesting book. So the third category, where the all 5 categories are in equal proportion, well, there is a lot of different reactions to this book. So this has a wide spectrum of responses. So that is the, the most interesting would be the one which has all ones and all fives, because you either hate it or you love it. There are no neutrals.
Sir, if
All
you
right.
give me permission, then can I quickly present
Yes.
my questions and answers as well?
Sure, please go ahead, Saira.
Okay, I am sharing my screen. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, we got it.
So my answer for the first question was that if you see that there are the 5 categories for rating the particular books, any book. So there are only 5 categories, and you can rate those books in those 5 categories, and you are giving same 5 categories to each and every book. So there could be different books with different categories, different type of ratings. So basically, and then even in that, average is going to hide that how each category was rated. So separately, how it was rated, then the average is going to hide that, conceal that. If see, for example, and now the person who is rating the book, we don't know who is rating the book. For example, if someone rated it 5 on the basis of content, maybe he or she rated it because it was author was his or her friend. He rated on the basis of for the love of his friend. So we can't just take numbers and say that this is the all thing we can say about anything.
Yeah,
Second,
this is a very good comment, because actually one of the strategies that people use to get their book to rank highly is they ask all their friends to go to Amazon and rank it highly, and then the Amazon thinks that this is a very popular book, and it gets so this is true. I mean, basically that's what we are trying to say, is that in real statistics we don't just look at the number, we try to look at what is behind that number, and that can vary a lot. So the same number can have a lot of different meanings, but this kind of issue is never raised in conventional statistics course, because the theory is that your analysis stops at the number. You're not supposed to look behind the number. So go ahead.
okay, the second question you asked, that if newspaper is going to publish a statement that there is inflation, there is some inflation, and they are just giving you 1%, but will it give you a complete information about the situation? So basically, I considered the example you gave in the chapter, in which you categorize the goods in different groups, and then you said that the price increased in that particular group of good was different than the other. If we are going to say that in price increased, then we don't know that about which category of goods we are talking. For example, if you are going to say that on the basis of alcohol, that price increased in the alcohol, but there are people who don't consume alcohol. So if they are going to read this statement that inflation increased, and newspaper published it on the basis of the price of alcohol, and it can they are going to get heart attack by reading this, oh, inflation has just increased, specifically poor people. But that this statement, a single statement or single percentage, can mislead them if the information is not complete. It's just giving you one figure. The second question you asked that why this assumption the sufficient statistics is not correct behind, like if you are going to consider this assumption for the inflation data. So basically, if we are going to consider one point as a explanation of whole data or one data point, this is not going to present the whole data. Then because we are taking one data point and considering it as an information for everything. The fourth question was you asked about how, like, what is the relevant group for CPI? I made this table, and relevant group for consumer price index will be households, and households they will use this data for their budgeting. Then the producer price index and producers are going to be benefited from this data, and they are going to make decision about their production. Then core inflation, the policymakers will be benefited for this and from this data, and they are going to use it for making the policies. So each category has different relevant group and has different goal.
Very good. These are good answers.
Sir, I have a question from you. This was was in my mind from the very start of the course, that even when we read statistics, when we read the if we study regression line, then we have dependent variable, constant, independent variable, and we have that error term. That error term is indicating that the statisticians are not saying that they know everything. They are just giving this margin of unknown as well. And this unknown, this error term is indicating that.
Yes. Well, actually, you see, what happens is a very, very zabardast trick. See, you say, okay, we don't know anything about the error. Then you say, let us assume that the error is normal. Now, actually, that's a very powerful assumption. You're saying that I know what earlier you said, this is what I don't know, but now you're saying I know what it is. And now, once you make these assumptions about the errors, people don't pay much attention to that because it's something unknown, so it can be anything. But actually, it's these assumptions which give you all the results of the regression model. Everything comes from the assumptions you make about the unknown. And this unknown is the real world that you have not considered. So basically, all of statistics is a fraud because of these assumptions that you make about the this is actually exactly what I'm calling the Fisherian approach. Fisherian approach starts by making assumptions about the error term, and it is these assumptions which drive everything, all the inferences. But you think that it is the data which is telling you things, but actually it's the assumptions. All right, let's go on to group B.
Thank you, sir.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam. Who is presenting this time?
Khaja Naveed, sir.
Oh, Khaja Naveed, yes.
Sir, first of all, I would want to pay my apology because I could not find the questions at the right time in the text. I just visited the website and there were no questions there. I just have received the PDF file an hour ago and have tried to compile the answers, but only have completed
Just put
the
up.
answers.
Do you have the questions, or I can put it up, and then we can just work through it together? Oh, unless it's
Okay,
a
sir.
computational exercise.
Okay, sir. So may I share my screen, sir?
Yes, please go ahead.
So at first, sir, I attempted to just to summarize the key points of the lecture. The main thing which was highlighted as a preliminary thing to the section of that chapter was the type of approaches regarding the acquisition of knowledge. So it was stated that analytic approach break everything in small parts and study them separately, which is at par the approach which is being followed in the Western world. And the synthetic approach is that one which put all separate pieces together and study it as a whole in a holistic perspective. And Islamic approach is very near to this synthetic approach. So this is just a comparison of that thing. we are talking about the construction of sensitive price index and how expensive it is for the masses to buy the necessities. So it is a brief summary of that process, that a price index reduces a large number of prices to one price. It is a kind of data reduction, and which highlights some things and some items and ignores some other things. So it is very important to understand that what is being highlighted and what is being ignored, because it will shed light on the purpose of that data reduction, that for what purpose it has been carried out. So it is the key points of those things which the data reduction consequence in that one should pay attention to public provision of necessities like social welfare programs, government hospitals, government provision of education, and one should also pay attention to the availability of non-market goods. All of these factors matter in matters of how much money is needed by the masses to enable them to buy essentials. So all of these things would contribute into the devising of an efficient price index. However, these factors would not be considered in a standard statistics course, which we are going through that all of these things are ignored. And going outside the study of numbers is strongly discouraged by the conventional approach, which is based on the analytic approach. So the Western approach is following the analytic approach, and they claim that the statistician job is confined to the analysis of numbers and not to the bigger real world context from which the number come. The three questions which I have tried to address, the first one is to list the items of household which are important for us. So the main thing of our household is wheat flour. Second thing is rice. The third thing is chicken. Then it is milk. Then cooking oil, pulses, grocery, sugar, petrol expenses, utilities, means electricity, gas, PTCL, and kids' school expenses. So I have numbered these items for my response to the first question. The second question is regarding the amount spent in 2020 and 2021. So it is a rough estimate of our own household. We are 10 people in our household. We are two brothers married. It means that two families are there in our household. The previous year's expense on wheat flour is 60,000, and for 2020 and for 2021 it is 80,000 roughly. For rice it is it was 30,000
And
in
so on.
2020,
So you don't
and
have
so
to go
on and
through
so
the.
forth. Okay. Now the next step was, the third question was regarding the quantity of selected items. So I have selected these 6 things from that list. For wheat flour it is 720 kg. For rice it is around about 100 kg. For chicken it
And
is
so on.
about 300 kg, and the most astonishing one for me is that of milk, which is 1080 kg. I was
Allah.
not, I had not noticed it that we consume that much of milk per year, but it is a huge amount. Okay. So these 3 questions I have tried to answer. The fourth question, sir, I would like to discuss it giantly. So is it visible, sir? The PDF file I have just.
You haven't gotten to the question yet. Is I'm
Okay.
still seeing amount spent 720 kg, 100 kg, and so on.
Yeah. Okay.
Question is
Now,
not there.
is it here now?
Screen. No, screen is. Now it is here. Yes.
Okay, sir.
So basically, the goal was to show you how you construct inflation, because how you calculate inflation, because most people just say, okay, this is 8%, but there is a process which is used to calculate inflation, and if you do it for your own house, you will understand. So this is the question.
Okay, sir. So it requires, I think, calculations, and it would not be possible here. So I think
All
the
right. So
fifth.
basically, this question was about calculating the last pair index and the Pash index, and the numbers are set up so that the two come out quite different. And then you're supposed to think about why they are different and how they can. And basically, all right. So instead of talking about the question, let me talk about the ideas in my mind which led me to create this question. Basically, whenever you're trying to understand something, you should always try to understand it in the simplest possible case. So, the simplest possible case for inflation is there are only two goods, and then there are only two dates. There's this year and second year. So, when you do the calculations in a two by two, two goods, two time periods, two prices, then you will understand the principles in the easiest possible example. And once you have the understanding of the easiest possible case, then you can build up on that. What happens usually is that people start by looking at a very complicated situation where you have 100 goods and 100 prices, and then you can't understand what's going on. And you just say, okay, this is too much for me to understand. And so you say that it is not necessary to understand. We just feed it to the computer and we run the process and we get a number out. So here the goal in a simple model is to try to understand what that inflation number means, where it comes from, and so on. So that was the idea behind the construction of the question. All right, so let's go on to section C, group C.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Lisa.
Yes, I would like to try to answer the group C because when actually we supposedly had a discussion this morning, but I didn't find anybody else to discuss.
Yes.
So yes.
Everywhere there's motivation problem. They are very busy
Yes.
with their lives.
So the first one is regarding the inflation that, as previously Professor also mentioned, that it is a qualitative phenomenon. So in this section, we try to comment about this one. So actually, from this example, we can know that the inflation actually varies according to the purchasing pattern. So each household might have its own consumption pattern, which can be influenced by the advertising campaign, and also the consumption within even in the same household may also differ across time. So like this is the example they also given in the explanation of the section 5C. Actually, if we see here, for example, there are two households, the consumption diverged. So the inflation rate of these two households will be different. So it is a things that really depends on the purchasing pattern. And the question 2 regarding the inflation rate that is aims to measure the whether to assess whether the poor can afford for the minimum requirement of the calories. So instead of using the budget inflation, since the calories is measured from the number of the consumption, it is please correct me if I'm wrong. So it's better to use the calorie inflation to know the actual consumption rather than the budget, because if we in using the budget, it is include the price, which actually it is not directly related with the total of consumption of the calories. Is it true, Prof?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay, and then the question number 3 regarding the housing price and inflation. So we read an article, and in this article, we noticed that there is different changes in measuring the inflation. So after the changes, we know that there is a weakened correlation between the housing price and inflation, because after the changes, to measure the price of living, it is using the rental equivalent approach. So meaning that if someone has the house, it is using the consumption value of the house, not the value of the house itself. So it is like kind of a rental that is being spent to have a to have the service living in a house.
Yes. This was actually quite significant because actually there are two things which are not included in inflation. For example, the stock prices could be shooting through the roof, or even the housing values could be shooting through the roof. But this is not measured as inflation. But rental value, because you pay for rental, you consume rental. This is part of inflation. And so, if you are in your own house, then there is an imputed rental that they think about what you would be paying for rent if you were renting the house. And so this is so one of the things is that these measures are arbitrary. I mean, they're trying to get something which is real, but it's a qualitative phenomena. You can't really measure it very accurately. But if you have a goal, why are you trying to measure inflation? Then you can find better numbers. All right, so we will go ahead. Go on to question 4.
And the question 4 is to use the raspberries and also patches to see that there is a kind of difference calculation here. So actually the raspberries using the previous year's quantity. So this is the example that I use here, the quantity of from the 2018 and 2019. It is used the quantity actual number in the 2018, and in basis it using the current year's quantity. In here in the quotient, we suppose the price is getting lower, so the price in the 2019 is getting lower, so we will get a lower budget. But actually the question is, here we need to show that the result will be different. But from this calculation, what's wrong with this calculation, Prof? The inflation.
You have only one good. You have to have two
Okay.
goods. One
Okay,
good is a technological good, which has low price in the second
Yeah.
year.
Mhm.
So when you use POSH, this will have things will be cheap in the current year and were
Mhm.
expensive in the previous year. So inflation will
Okay.
be low. But if you go in the other direction, if you start from very expensive goods current in the last year because they were new, and then they become cheap in the next year, then this will have, but this will not be. You will be measuring the bundles that were purchased last year, which were small, and so those bundles will not contribute as much. But if people buy a lot of these technological goods in the next year when they become cheap, then when you use the new bundle, it will have a very different effect. So the problem is that you use only one good, and that's why you didn't get the
Okay.
results.
Yes. Thank you, Prof. We will revise later. And the last question regarding to the inflation, the step that can be taken to reduce the inflation actually. So as also mentioned in the lecture of the section 5C, that actually the consumption pattern can be influenced by the campaign that is made by the producer. So here, if we would like to reduce the inflation, once among the steps that can be taken is actually to reduce the consumption. That is, later the quantity will be lower, and it will also reduce the inflation rate.
Well, no, inflation rate will remain the same, but the impact of the inflation will be lower. So basically what we are saying is that suppose we are worried about inflation, instead of measuring inflation, let's say that people, you should live simply, don't consume the more expensive goods. And basically we can provide social support to the poor people, provide them with the food. Ask the rich people that instead of eating out in restaurants, whenever you feel like eating out, you just contribute this money to the feeding of the poor. So this is the kind of Islamic social responsibility measures, and that is a solution to inflation. One more factor which makes a big difference is the conspicuous consumption. When people see that other people are buying something, then they also want to buy. So this is something which is very harmful. Actually, people have measured that it's just a negative externality. Everybody buys something to show off, and then since everybody has it, it is not of any value to anybody. So everybody wasted a lot of time and money and energy buying things, but they didn't get any benefit out of this. So they didn't get any increase in utility. So it would be useful to simplify life, reduce luxury goods. Everybody will be happier. They will have more time. So this is the kind of solution to inflation which is not conventional.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you for-
so let's go on to next section.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Wa
Yes,
alaikum
I'm here.
assalam.
Let me share the questions, as you said. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so
Should I read the questions or?
I guess we can read them. Again, the goal of the question was to try to get you to do the calculations. So if you have an artificial data set of 10 households, where 9 is poor and 9 are poor and 1 is rich, and suppose that we compute the
partial and less pairs
yes,
right?
yes,
There are different households at different budget levels.
yes,
So the inflation will be different for all.
yes. Well, you see, in the way the question is set up, there are 4 commodities: rice, wheat, chicken, and beef. And the poor households only buy wheat and rice, and rich buy all 4. So in the way it's set up, the rice and wheat are have inflation rate 10% and 20%, and the chicken and beef has 40% and 80%. So if we compute the inflation for the poor people, it will be only about somewhere between 10% and 20%, right? Because it will be some combination of the chicken and the beef. Chicken is 10% and beef is 20%. Is that clear?
Yes, yes.
So, but for the rich people, suppose they buy only chicken and beef, then the inflation is 40% and 80%. So for the rich people, it will be this. Now look at the incomes, the budget of the rich. There's only one rich household, but its budget is 100,000. So this, when you look at the total quantities, which is what you do, you take the aggregate, then basically the inflation index will only focus on the rich people. So it will seem like the inflation rate is maybe 60%, But this is because you have taken the aggregate. So basically that's it. I mean, that's the key thing. The PASH index will come out, will also give similar results. It will not be much different because there's only one household that's going to drive the result. What happens to the budget of the rich household, that is going to determine the inflation. What the poor people do will not matter because their whole total consumption is very small. Because and the consumption of the rich is very high. So the aggregate consumption will not reflect the experience of the rich households, and it will not reflect the experience of the poor households. All right, so that was the goal of this particular exercise. One of the goals was to give you the theoretical, but another goal was to teach you how to do simulations. Simulations are a very important way to understand things and to do data analysis, because instead of assuming that the data is random, you create your own data and then you can do the analysis, and then you get much better understanding of what is going on. Okay, so this is not something we can do here. So let's go on to the last section.
Section
E, is
E.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Group E. So is there anybody from Group E here?
Yes, sir, I am.
Oh, yes.
Sir, I
Tasir.
want to share. I want to share my slides with you people before I start. Just give me a minute.
Okay.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So, sir, I would go to, I'll just share some points with you. I think I should share my, okay. So this this is question number 1, but before I start discussing the questions, I've attempted 2 out of 4. I'm sorry, this is the best I could do. I am having trouble in putting some formulas in Excel, but I have tried my level best. I'm going to show my homework to you. So basically this section is talking about quantity theory of money, and this talks about how quantity theory of money in conventional form states that inflation is economic theory states that inflation is representing the money growth in money, and MV is equal to PT. Basically, just a moment. I'm sure. I'm going to share the other thing. Is it there? Document.
Some Russian hacker somehow got into our chat.
I don't know, sir, what was that? I couldn't even control it. I'm so sorry.
No, that was not your fault. It was somebody who hacked in, but I think our oh, he's connecting again. Can you, Yusuf? Can you try to get rid of this guy?
Yes, sir. I will handle this. He won't be able to do anything
Okay.
more.
All right.
Okay, I am actually trying to look at one of the files that I've shared with myself. I think it is here. Okay. If I can share this screen, I can share it with you people, and then I can show you. Just a moment. Yes, this is the one. Okay, so I'm sorry for the bad handwriting, but this is the summary of what I've been doing. So I wanted to share it with you before I went into answering the questions. So quantity theory of money basically states that money times velocity, or the circulation of money, is equal to price into the number of transactions. MV is equal to PT. So what it is stating that M is equal to, it is the summation of the products of prices into the number of transactions. And we also know that when we do price into quantity, that means it is the amount of money transferred during a transaction. So summation of all this is equal to M star, which is also equal to GDP, and M star is much greater than M, and that is because money is being used many times over. So MV is equal to M star, where V is the velocity. This is what I have understood. And if we basically let this, we consider a composite good in which Q1, Q2 up to QK are being purchased and sold in the market. So as same product or quantity can be sold multiple times as well. So we can say that the summation of Q1 to QK will be less than the number of transactions that are taking place. Transactions will be more as compared to the goods in the market. So the price vector P is basically is a summation of P1 to Pn, and Q vector of quantities is Q1 to Qn. And when we use the dot, then P dot Q is basically a summation of the price into quantity products. So when we are calculating price index, what we are doing is that we are taking P into Q of each entry and then taking summation of it for the base year. And we do the same thing for the current year. And when we divide the current year prices to the base year, then we are able to calculate the price index. But to test the quantity theory of money, what we need to do is that we need to divide the nominal growth rate of GDP that we get into two different portions. One is the increase in the growth rate, or the growth rate due to increase in the prices, that is inflation, and the growth rate which is happening due to increase in the quantity, or it is the real output or real growth actually. So yes, the example that has been shared here is that it is showing the nominal growth rate of 8.17%, but when you divided it into two sections separately, looking at the percentages, then for prices it was 6.15%, and for real growth it was 1.91%.
Correct. That is a correct understanding.
So as per quantity theory of money, the growth rate in the money, growth in the money is basically leads to growth in the prices, but not in the real growth, or it doesn't impact the real growth or the quantity. So having money series, if we get the money series from the data, we can actually calculate this and see if that is happening. And what will happen is that we can have these two quantity theories for two time periods, basically QTMs. MV is equal to PQ for, you can say, time period T, and then for time period T minus 1, or the previous time period. And this is in multiplicative form. So to convert it into additive form, we can take actually the log of this equation. And this equation number 1 and 2 are basically representing the two situations where we are taking the additive forms. So if we subtract the equation 1 from 2, so if we subtract 1 from 2, we get this 2 from 1. It is log of M. We can calculate by subtracting it log of MT minus 1, and that can actually be log of MT over mt minus 1, and that is basically the percentage m. This is the formula that we'll be using. Growth rate, this is the growth rate formula. So if we write this equation in the growth rate form, we can say that growth rate of m plus growth rate of v is equal to growth rate of p plus growth rate of q. So this is basically an accounting identity, but it may not be true as far as the economic theory is concerned. Economic theory may not hold altogether, because economic theory states that v is constant. So in one way, they are saying that percentage v is going to be 0, as v is exogenous, or velocity is exogenous, and it is not being impacted by money or prices or the output. So key economic hypothesis is that M is impacting P, but it is not impacting Q. So this is classical dichotomy. And here what they are trying to say is that money is a veil or money is neutral. And this dichotomy has two types. If it is strong, then it holds in short run as well as in long run. But if it is weak, then it only holds in the long run. So Keynes had said that money is not neutral. And this is what the classicals do not agree with Keynes about.
Yes.
So this is the calculation or the answer for question number 1. Let me stop sharing this and I'll share the presentation and I'll go stepwise from there.
Okay.
I'll share my presentation here. Okay. So, sir, is it visible?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, so question number 1 is that if price changes from 100 to 150, what is the percentage change in prices? And if price changes from 150 to 100, what is the percentage change in price? If these two numbers are different, because the base of the percentage is different, then why the usual definition of percentage change leads to problems? And we have to see that if we use this log definition of percentage change in prices that we have just seen for percentage of M, percentage of E, if we use it for percentage of P, then this problem does not exist. So for that, what I have done is that I have calculated, I'm sorry for the bad handwriting, bear with me. So if prices increase from 100 to 150, then if we are taking the typical formula of percentage change in the prices, then it is going to be 150 minus, that is P2 minus P1 over P2 into 100. That is going to be 33% increase. Whereas if the prices are decreasing from 150 to 100, then it using the same formula of P2 minus P1 over P2 into 100, 100 minus 150 or 100, it becomes like 50% decrease. Now, here increase and decrease are different. So although the amount of quantity of prices that is being changed is the same, but increase and decrease is showing very different percentage increase or decrease here. But if we are using the log formula, you can see that log of 100 minus log of 150, it is going to give you 2 minus 2.17, it's negative 0.17. But in reverse order, if you take log of 150 minus log of 100, it is going to be 2.17 minus 2, that will become 0.17. Only there is a negative or positive sign, and that is showing the direction of change, and it's not only the number or the absolute amount is exactly the same. So I think this one is not going to give you a problem, but the previous formula is going to give you a problem. This is my understanding.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so question number 2, it was said that plot the nominal GDP series of any two countries that was given in the data set we were provided with. And you will note that two series tend to move together. Roughly calculating the statistical correlation will lead to very strong positive correlation. Do you think this is a causal relationship between X and Y? If not, what accounts for this observed positive correlation? So this is, I picked up Algeria and Argentina, and I plotted those in Excel. So this is the sort of graph I got. And yes, roughly they are they are increasing, going to the same point, but their trends is a bit different. However,
did you calculate the correlation?
Sir, actually, I have not been able to do that. But
okay.
This question number 2, I can answer, because I think that internationally, the level of inflations and deflation that is taking place, inflations that are taking place probably are the reasons. But if we go into the data of Algeria and Argentina in detail, then we may be able to shows some sort of reason for this correlation, because the fact is that there is some confounding factor which is showing them to behave in a particular way, but there is no direct causality between X and Y here.
Right. Basically, when you have two series which is correlated, one common reason that they are correlated is what is called a common cause. There is something which affects both of them. And basically, the growth of the global economy is the common cause. If the global economy is growing, it has positive, beneficial impacts on all economies. If the global economy is going down, then it has negative. So as long as the global economy is going, everything will go along with it, although there will be individual variation, of course. Some people benefit more, some people benefit less. So there is a common cause, and the common cause is the global, what's happening to the world economy.
Yes.
So that's, that the general principle is the common cause.
Right.
There is something which affects both.
So
That
this is what I was
causes
trying to say, but
correlation.
I could not get the common cause. I was okay. So question number 3 is, for both of your selected series, calculate the rate of change of percentage X and percentage Y. Maybe X is for Argentina and Y is for the other country.
Yes.
Do you see any correlation? So use Excel to compute the correlation between the two series using the Corel command. Now I would like to show you something that I have done. I don't know how how well I could, but I want to show you my Excel sheet. Here
Yes.
it is. So if you can see, this is Algeria's data on the top and Argentina's at the bottom. So what I have done is that in on this line, I have tried to use the formula of log of x2 minus x1. And what I have done is I have taken continuous series like this 1960 I've taken as the base year. And for every year, I've taken log of 61 with 60, 62 with 60. I don't know if I did it correct, but this is for Algeria, and the bottom one is for Argentina. I have calculated these two series, but and the overall change for this country is the growth rate is 0.99 or 99%, and this is 100%. Now I don't know if I have done it correctly, and I could not actually put up the formula of correlation, and I don't know how to do that. So I'll learn that.
Right. So did you do the chart? You have the chart of these things? These two series, the growth series?
No, sir, I haven't drawn the chart, but I can do it in a second.
Yes.
If you do.
Let
me, I'll just
insert
the line. Okay.
Recommended chart.
So here is the chart. Right?
Yes. So not much correlation. No, you can see it. We can see it. So there's not much correlation. The series behave very differently. The point is that although the growth of the world economy affects both of these series and causes correlation, but when you look at the year-to-year change, every country is going through its own growth process, and then the correlation becomes much less. If you actually calculated the correlation, you would find that the correlation is very high in the levels, but quite low in the differences in the rate of change. Rafi, did you have a question? Rafi Amiruddin, you have raised your hand.
Yes. Yes, sir, I have a comment here, brief comment here.
Yes.
So my understanding is that if it is that it is true that generally in this type of situation, there is no correlation between the GDP, nominal GDPs of two countries. And the reason, if there is correlation, and still there is causal correlation. Even if there is, correlation, there is no causal relationship. But my understanding is that there are some contexts in which some countries' GDP may be closely related with the GDP of some other countries. For example, some neighboring countries, and both of them have very close trade relationships. So the situation in one country may have some causal effect on the GDP evolution of some other country. So what do you say about this?
Well, You see, this is an empirical and quantitative matter. The fact is that if you think about the determinants of GDP, you have your factories, you have your whole economy, which is the domestic economy, your agriculture, your industry, your consumers. This has no relationship to what's happening. What's happening in Pakistan has no relation to what's happening in Iran or Afghanistan. Everything, all of the determinants of our GDP are coming from inside Pakistan, and they have no relationship to India or Afghanistan or Iran. So these things, there may be some general trends which affect both, but so these should be independent. Now, if there is some trade between our countries, the trade percentage is about like less than 10%. So it cannot cause a 90% correlation. But actually, if you calculate the correlation, you will find that it's around 90% or 80%. So the high correlation is not explained by the linkages between the economies. All right.
Thanks.
So this is the question number 4. I'm sorry, I haven't attempted this, or it hasn't been contributed from any of the other members of the group as well. And I'm going to try and share it in a day or two. For the selected countries, X and Y, plot the percentage inflation and against percentage M2 or the broad money. And we had to see any relationship in the series if the two series moved in different ways or patterns. So can we reject the hypothesis of causality? And we had to think about this question by looking at the graphs of the two series. And as I haven't drawn the graphs, so I can't comment on it.
Basically, this is, and the question is about one very important principle of scientific methodology. And this principle is that you can reject hypotheses, but you cannot accept them. So if two series are moving very close together, then you don't know why. It could be that X causes Y, it could be that Y causes X, or it could be that there is a common cause. And there are also more complicated reasons for correlations. But these are the three most common situations. So when two threes are correlated, you can't tell anything about whether or not what is the direction of causation, or whether or not there is causation. But if the two series are moving very independently, then you can say that there is no causal relationship between one and the other, because what happens is that you are changing one of them and there is no effect on the other. I mean, you see it in the data that one is wiggling up and down, the other is staying flat. So if there is no effect, basically you can see this in the data that this series X, it changed by a huge amount, but the other series didn't change. So you can say that, well, changes in X do not affect changes in Y. So empirically, data-wise, you can establish independence, but you cannot, and you can establish correlation, but you cannot establish causation. So this is very important.
Yes. Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
This is a very frequent observation especially in economics department, that they just get some series and the students, they are churning out these researches where they just take the series and then they run the regressions, and then they say this percentage of this is happening because of that. So that is sort of establishing causality, isn't it? Then if it is only
that is assuming causality. The regression relationship, one of the assumptions is that the variable X is exogenous and it causes the endogenous variable. So under the assumption that there is a causal relationship, the regression numbers can be interpreted in the way that they are usually done. But this assumption is usually false. So basically the results are usually wrong. But it does not establish, regression does not establish causation, it assumes causation.
So that means that for actually trying to establish causality, or understanding causality, we need to look at the real life aspects of the data and the things before we understand.
Absolutely. You can never establish causality by doing data analysis. You always have to, this is what David Friedman said, that you have to expend shoe leather. You have to go out and walk around in the world and learn how this series was calculated if you want to establish causality. Yes, Rafi, go ahead. You have another question.
Yes. Sir, there are some recent developments in the econometric literature, for example, instrumental variable approaches. And
Yes.
they are designed to basically answer this type of question. So what if there is no causality? And I mean, they take care of the problem of endogeneity, etc. So do you think that there is any hope that they can actually solve this apparently very intractable problem of lack of causality and problematizing all this issue as X causing Y?
You see, if you look carefully at these techniques, there is no automatic technique. See, when you have an instrumental variable, it means that, you see, forget it, instrumental is a more complicated. Exogenous is, suppose that something is exogenous. Suppose that I can actually move something. So, for example, money is a good example, that we create a lot of money. Then something happens. Then we can say that probably if my changing the money caused a big change in the economy and it happened later, then probably this is a causal effect because I did it. Now, if money changes by itself in the system, then I can't say anything. So observational data is very different from experimental data where I actually control one of the variables. Now, instrumental variable is an indirect way to create exogeneity, and it doesn't really work very well. Similarly, if you look at all of the other causality literature, you are making assumptions about the real world, which basically assumptions that something happened independently by itself. So there are the four methods which have been suggested, that if there, for example, one of the neatest things was that the randomized experiment, that you put people at random into one group or the other group. So you know that being in this group is not caused by anything in this world. It is a decision of the dice. It basically disconnects the choice of the group from any real world factor. And this makes these groups exogenous. Then if something is different between the two groups, then you can tell that it must be due to the whatever, if one group is treated and the other one is not treated, then you can say that, okay, this is the effect of the treatment, not an effect of the group. So these are very complicated issues, but basically the key thing to understand is that causality can never be discovered by numbers themselves. It has to be linked to real world factors. All of the methods for causality require some statement about what is happening in the real world. And it's on the basis of this, what's happening in the real world, that you can try to get some causal results. It's impossible to do. And this has to do also with the artificial intelligence, because the artificial intelligence, machine learning, people are very impressed that you feed machine all the data and then they learn things. Actually, what the prediction process involves finding out the causal patterns, but the data never reveal the truth about the causality. So the machine learning, even if it has hundreds of thousands of points of data, it can still go wrong. All right, so
Thanks, sir.
Sir, one question.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, in terms of the machine learning, what about the explainable artificial intelligence? which is a thriving area of machine learning, which wants to go deep into the significance of the coefficients from where did these coefficients emerged. So what about the role of those explainable AI in causality?
Well, the explainability is a very interesting and a very useful idea. That it says that it asks the AI that, okay, first of all, the artificial intelligence is like a black box. So you feed in the data and it says, okay, this is what's going to happen. So you say, ask, why are you saying this? So then it says that, okay, look, I noticed that as the student's shoe size grows in the data set, I find that his reading ability is also growing. So now you have given me this new person, and he has a large shoe size. So I assume that that he is going to be able to read very well. So this is I mean the internal process by which the artificial intelligence has reached the conclusion. It doesn't know that there is no possible causal relationship between shoe size and reading, except for the fact that as people grow older and they go to the school, they learn more to read more. So this is a spurious correlation. So the artificial intelligence cannot tell the difference between a spurious correlation and a genuine one. But if it tells you that this is how I have done things, then you can, then it creates interesting hypotheses that, okay, the artificial intelligence has found that these two things are running together. And sometimes you can rule it out, that there's no possible causal relationship. So this is nonsense. Or you can say that, okay, this is an interesting hypothesis. Maybe these two things have causal relationship. Then you can go and test it separately by looking at the real world and running some tests and experiments in the real world. These are difficult questions, and most people are in great deal of confusion. They have a lot of awe of big machines, and they say, oh, these machines, they know everything and they will be able to calculate everything. Google knows everything. So there's a difference between observable knowledge and the hidden unobserved mechanism which would drive that. Those things are not easy to learn and cannot be learned by artificial intelligence. And actually, even by human beings, we are born knowing certain causal connections. That is how we get to. That's how we get to understand the world we live in. Because these things have been printed into our hearts by our Creator. All right. If there are any other questions, if there aren't any, we can conclude this session today. All right. So on the website, I have opened up the chapter 6, but it will take me a few days to make the PDF. And actually, tomorrow I'm delivering a lecture on how to move to an Islamic economic system at IBA in Karachi. Basically, what I'm going to be saying is that you cannot make the interest rate zero in the modern economy. If you do, the economy will collapse. You cannot do it on its own. You have to do a lot of other things. So what are these other things? What do we need to do in order to have a proper economy? In order to have a proper Islamic economy where the interest rate is zero, you have to do a lot of other things, because Islamic economy is not just zero interest. It has to have justice, it has to have provide for all. And if you do all of those things, then you can get interest to zero, but you can't do it independently. That just we make the interest zero and everything else is left alone. If you do that, the economy will collapse. So that's actually, I'm going to be talking on Karachi tomorrow evening around 4 o'clock. And there is a Facebook link that I have just put in the chat box. And this will be live streamed on the Facebook. The other thing I have put, there is a link to a blog post of mine about inflation. And that is, I just gave a talk on this, and it was, I've recorded. So these are some things that are, the inflation is relevant to this lecture, and the Islamic economy is also related in the sense that in the Islamic economy, if you run it correctly, you can make the inflation rate zero. That's the only way that you can make the, you can also make the interest rate zero. Because if you want to keep interest rate zero, you have to make sure that there is no inflation. Because if there is inflation, then there will be injustice. So with that, let me conclude our lecture today. And so we will see you in 2 weeks. I've opened up the chapter 6 in the on the website, so you can go through the chapter 6 lessons, but the questions and the PDF file will be prepared a little bit later because I'm very busy this week. Okay, so see you later, inshallah, and we'll try. Actually, I would like the group leaders to try to reach out to the students in their groups and ask if they're having any problems, and find out how we can motivate them. If they're actually teachers, then maybe we can have some classes with those teachers separately. Maybe we can reach out to their students so that they understand that if they start teaching this material to the students will be excited. That's really what makes, excitement is contagious. If people are enthusiastic, then other people catch the enthusiasm. If people are finding it boring, difficult, tedious, then this also, feeling in the heart also communicates. All right, so I think we should stop. Yusuf, you can stop recording and finish up this session. Okay, Assalamu alaikum, bye-bye.